It was a Saturday afternoon in River Oaks, and Marcus Albright was on the rooftop terrace of a place where a single lunch cost more than most people made in a week. He had a glass of something amber in his hand, and a partner from Caldwell Sterling laughing at his table, and below him the city shimmered in the heat through the cool of the patio. He had closed a deal that morning. He had the mansion, the Range Rover in the valet line, and a custody order that said both children slept under his roof. Everything was exactly where he had arranged for it to be. 11 minutes away, on a cracked sidewalk off Navigation Boulevard, a woman was pushing a rolling cart toward a bus stops in the same heat that Marcus could not feel. Her name was Taraji, and the sweat ran down the back of her neck as she lifted two heavy pots up the steps of a city bus, one at a time, while the driver waited and the line behind her sighed. She had $300 to her name 8 weeks ago. She had a little less than that now. The cart held 40 foil containers of food, cooked in a kitchen she could not legally use, and she would sell every one of them today for $5 apiece, and it still would not cover rent. For 12 years, she had cooked the meals that built the career Marcus was toasting on that rooftop. He had never once said her name at a single one of those dinners, and he did not think about her now, not where she was, not what her hands were doing. Not the cart she was hauling onto a bus while he signed the check with a card that used to have her name beside his. In his mind, she had nothing. He was about to find out how wrong a man can be. So go back 11 months, to the morning he took the house, the car, and the children, and left his wife with $300 he was certain meant nothing. Now go back. Go back 11 months, to the morning a man took the house, the car, and the children, and left his wife with $300 he was certain meant nothing. Taraji grew up on Effie Road in South Memphis, in a narrow house that smelled like smoked paprika and brown butter, and something sweet underneath that she could never name but would know anywhere for the rest of her life. The house belonged to her grandmother, Cora Mae Booker, born in 1941, who lived in that same house for 52 years and cooked in that same kitchen every single day. Cora cooked for the neighbors. She cooked for the church and for anyone who showed up at the screen door looking like they had not eaten enough that day. She never asked for money, and she never turned a soul away. On Sundays, Cora made enough for 30 people and set it on the porch table, and whoever came, came. She kept a recipe book with a brown leather cover gone soft from years of hands on it. 214 pages, everyone written in blue ink in Cora's careful hand. 31 years of cooking recorded one dish at a time, with notes in the margins. Do not rush the roux. Or salt at the end, always at the end. Let the fire do its work. Taraji stood beside her in that kitchen from the time she could climb onto a stool and reach the counter. Cora did not hand her small jobs to keep her busy. She handed her real ones. Stir this. Taste that. Tell me what's missing. By 10, Taraji could build a pot of gumbo from memory. And by 12, she was cooking the Sunday porch table on her own, while her grandmother sat in the chair by the window and watched. Cora taught her to cook, and she taught her something underneath the cooking that had nothing to do with heat or timing. You feed people, and you look them in the eye. That is how you tell somebody they matter. Taraji heard that sentence more times than she could count. She heard it at 7, and again at 17, and again on the last morning she stood in that kitchen before she left Memphis for good. She was 22 when she moved to Houston for a job at a hotel restaurant downtown, entry-level, long hours, and she did not mind the hours one bit. The morning she left, Cora pressed two things into her hands, the recipe book and a photograph tucked inside the front cover. Cora Mae Booker, 1989, standing in front of the Effie Road kitchen in a white apron, hands dusted with flour, smiling like she knew something nobody else had figured out yet. Taraji carried both of those things for 16 years. The recipe book sat on the shelf in every apartment she lived in. She opened it often in the beginning, then less, then not at all after her grandmother got sick. Cora died on a Tuesday morning in March, 4 years before this story begins, 81 years old, in the same house on Effie Road, in a bed 12 feet from the kitchen where she had fed half a neighborhood for 3 decades. Taraji flew home for the funeral and sat in that kitchen for 2 hours after everyone left. She did not cook, and she did not open the book, and she flew back to Houston the next day and set it on a shelf and did not touch it again for 4 years. She met Marcus Albright when she was 25. He was 28, a junior partner at a private equity firm called Caldwell Sterling, and he wore good suits, and he listened when she talked, and he remembered things she had said 3 conversations ago. He had a plan for everything. That was the first thing she noticed about him, the thing she mistook for safety. Marcus always had a plan. They married when she was 27. A small ceremony, 40 guests, and Taraji cooked the reception herself because she wanted to, and because Marcus said it would feel more personal that way. He was right. It was personal. It was also the beginning of something she would not see clearly for 12 years. They had 2 children. Jalen came when she was 29, Imani when she was 34. She stopped working at the hotel when Jalen was born because Marcus suggested it and it made sense, and childcare cost more than she earned. 2 years later, he suggested he handle the finances. "You focus on the kids," he said. "I'll manage the accounts." It made sense. He worked with money all day. 3 years after that, he said the house should be in his name alone for the mortgage, just a technicality. The loan terms were better with one borrower. So she signed. She did not read every page, and she did not ask questions, because that is what you do when you trust somebody. You sign, and you move on, and you go cook dinner. Marcus was good at one thing above all others. He controlled the picture. In front of his colleagues, he was the provider. In front of friends, he was the attentive husband. In front of the children, he was the father who planned the trips and coached Saturday basketball. Taraji cooked every dinner party Caldwell Sterling ever needed. She made the food his colleagues talked about for weeks, set the table, cleaned up after. Marcus introduced her as my wife, and the food appeared as though it had arrived on its own. He never once said Taraji made this. He said we put together a little something and moved the conversation along. Every connection he built in Houston ran through a meal she cooked. Every client dinner, every Sunday, a partner came over for what Marcus called a casual thing that took her 6 hours in the kitchen. Her hands built the foundation of his career, and her name was on none of it. Not the bank accounts, not the mortgage on the River Oaks mansion, not the investment portfolio, not the car titles, not the credit cards. 12 years of cooking and cleaning and raising 2 children, and her name did not appear on a single document that mattered. She did not notice. That is the thing about control when it is done slowly. You do not feel the ground move under you. You just wake up one morning and the ground is somewhere else, and you are standing on nothing. Here is the part worth writing down, the part that happens in real kitchens in every state in this country. Coercive control rarely arrives as a fist. It arrives as a favor. Let me take care of that for you. You don't need to worry about it. Just sign here. Marcus began planning the divorce 14 months before Taraji knew anything was wrong. He hired Preston Vance, 53 years old, a family asset attorney with an office on Post Oak Boulevard, the kind of lawyer who did not handle feelings. He handled structures. Marcus did not need a therapist. He needed an architect. In March of the year before the papers came, Vance restructured the mortgage, and the River Oaks house on Inwood Drive, the house Taraji had lived in for 11 years, went through a refinance that moved the deed into Marcus's name only. He brought the papers home on a Wednesday and set them on the kitchen counter while she was cooking and said the bank had offered a better rate and she just needed to sign the last 2 pages. She signed. She remembered the pen in her hand. She did not remember anyone explaining what she was signing away. In June, Vance moved the joint savings, $93,000, into an individual account at a different branch, and the statements stopped coming to the house. Taraji did not notice, because she had not looked at a bank statement in 6 years. In September, the investment account was locked into a trust naming Marcus as sole beneficiary. In November, the car titles were updated to his name only. In January, the credit cards in her name were closed, and Marcus told her there had been fraud and the bank had issued new ones, and the new cards came in his name, and she never saw them. 14 months. 7 documents. Every one of them signed or processed while she helped Jalen with homework and drove Imani to her dance class and trusted the man she had built a life beside. The papers arrived on a Thursday afternoon in April. She was standing at the stove. She had just turned off the burner, and she was holding a dish towel, and Marcus set the envelope on the counter between the salt and a bowl of rice. She opened it and read the first page. She did not sit down. She read all 23 pages standing up, and then she set them back on the counter exactly where the envelope had been, and she did not say a word. Marcus was watching from the doorway. She looked at him. He looked at her. Neither of them spoke. The hearing took 6 weeks, and Vance's team moved fast because they had been moving for 14 months already. They filed for primary custody, and the argument was simple and brutal. Taraji had no income, no individual account, no employment history for 10 years, no assets in her name, no credit. On paper, Taraji did not exist. Vance presented financial records showing Marcus as the sole provider, the mortgage in his name, the accounts in his name, a stable home with a father pulling a partner's salary. Judge Doyle granted Marcus temporary primary custody pending the final proceedings. Temporary. But the word did not feel temporary. The word felt like a door swinging shut. She packed one suitcase. She took her clothes, and she took the recipe book off the shelf, and she took the photograph tucked inside the front cover. There was $300 left in an old checking account that neither Marcus nor Vance had ever found, a joint account from the first year of the marriage that she had forgotten about and that he had never bothered to close. $300, the one thing they missed. She walked out of the house on Inwood Drive on a Friday morning. 11 years in that house, the range she had cooked 10,000 meals on, the counter where she rolled dough with Imani on Saturdays, the table where Jalen did his homework every night while she cooked beside him. She did not cry. She packed. Renee Carter pulled up at the curb at 10:15 in a gray sedan with the engine running, and she did not get out because she did not need to. Taraji put the suitcase in the back seat and got in and closed the door, and Renee pulled away, and Taraji did not look back at the house. She looked at the recipe book in her lap. Brown leather, blue ink, 214 pages. A photograph of a woman in a white apron, smiling, like she knew something. Marcus thought he had left his wife with nothing. Renee Carter lived in a 2-bedroom apartment on Alabama Street in the 3rd Ward. She was 39, a night shift nurse at Halstead Memorial, and she worked 7 at night to 7 in the morning 4 nights a week and came home to an apartment that smelled like coffee she had brewed 12 hours before. Taraji slept on the sofa, under a blanket from the hall closet, with $300 in an envelope in her bag. For 3 days, she did not leave the apartment. She did not eat much. She sat by the window and watched the parking lot and the people walking to places they needed to be. Her phone had 2 messages from Jalen. The first said, "Mom, when are you coming back?" The second said, "Imani keeps asking." She read both. She did not answer because she did not know what to say. She could not tell her son she was coming back because she did not know if it was true, and she could not tell him she was fine because she was sitting on a borrowed sofa with $300 and no answer to give anyone. She put the phone face down on the cushion. On the 4th night, with Renee at the hospital and the apartment dark, she could not sleep, and she reached into the bag on the floor and pulled out the book. She had not opened it in 4 years, not since the funeral. The photograph slid out of the cover and landed on her lap. Cora May Booker, 1989, white apron, flower on her hands. Taraji held it for a long time without moving, without making a sound. Then she turned to the first page, red beans and rice, in her grandmother's careful blue ink, and in the margin smaller, "Do not rush the roux, let the fire do its work." She turned the page, fried catfish, salt at the end. She turned again, smothered chicken, and at the bottom, "This one is for when somebody needs to feel better and doesn't know how to ask." Every page had a note, and every note sounded like Cora was standing right there in that dark apartment, talking the way she always had, not loud, just steady, just there. Taraji closed the book and held it against her chest and sat in the dark a while longer. The next morning she was up before Renee got home, in the kitchen, the book open on the counter, and she started to cook. When Renee opened the door at 7:15, the apartment smelled like smoked paprika and brown butter, and something sweet underneath, the exact smell from the kitchen on Effie Road, the one Taraji had carried in her body for 37 years. Renee stood in the doorway. Taraji stood at the stove. "I need to find somewhere to sell this," Taraji said. "I know a Saturday market," Renee said. She divided the $300 on the kitchen table that afternoon. $85 for a food handler's permit and a temporary vendor license from Harris County. $140 for ingredients. $40 for foil trays and forks and napkins. $35 left over, a buffer that would not buffer much. She rode the bus to the county health department, stood in line 2 hours, paid her $85, and walked out with a card and a permit number and a sheet listing what she could and could not legally do. She bought groceries at a discount store on Cullen Boulevard. Chicken thighs, rice, beans, oil, spices, foil trays. On Saturday at 5:45 in the morning, she carried 2 heavy pots and a folding table borrowed from New Canaan Baptist Church onto the bus. She rode it down to the market near Emancipation Park and set up at the far end of the row, between a woman selling candles and a man selling cutting boards. The other vendors had banners and canopies and business cards in little holders. Taraji had a folding table, 2 pots, 40 foil containers, and a piece of cardboard with her prices written in marker. She sold 4 containers in the first 3 hours. People walked past. They looked. Some slowed down. Most kept walking. She did not call out to anyone. She did not wave anybody over. She stood and she waited. At 20 to 12, a woman in her 50s wearing a church hat stopped and bought 1 container and opened it right there at the table and ate it standing up. She did not say anything for a full minute. Then she looked up. "This tastes like my grandmother's cooking," she said. She bought 3 more, and she asked Taraji her name, and she asked if she would be back next Saturday, and Taraji said yes. By 2 o'clock, she had sold 19 containers at $5 each. $95, minus $48 in ingredients and supplies. $47 in her hand on the bus back to Alabama Street. $47. Not enough for rent. Not enough for a deposit, not enough for anything but ingredients for next Saturday. But a woman had come back for seconds, and that was the only number that mattered. Week 2, 28 containers. Week 3, 35. Week 4, 40, sold out before 1 o'clock. The numbers did not jump. They climbed slowly, without stopping. There was a problem, though, and she found it at a library computer because she had no laptop and no internet at the apartment. Under Texas cottage food law, a home kitchen could be used for certain shelf-stable items. Prepared meals with meat and rice sold to the public required a licensed commercial kitchen inspected and certified. She had been selling for 4 weeks out of Renee's kitchen, in violation of the health code, and she had not known it. She read the regulations line by line for 3 hours. A certified kitchen could be rented by the hour at shared facilities around the city, $15 to $25 an hour. She did the math on the back of a receipt. She would need to sell at least 25 containers a week just to cover the kitchen before ingredients and bus fare. A food truck would solve the bigger problem, the mobility, the chance to go where the customers were, instead of waiting at one market on one day. Used trucks ran $20,000 to $40,000. She closed the tab. She had $47 a week, so she did what she could. She registered for 3 markets instead of 1, in 3 different parts of Houston, and rode 3 different bus routes at 5:30 in the morning with 2 pots, a folding table, and a rolling cart she bought for $12 at a thrift store. This was not a food truck dream. This was a woman pulling a cart onto a city bus before dawn to sell 40 containers of food cooked in a kitchen she could not legally use. That was the reality of it. Meanwhile, Marcus sat in his glass office in the Galleria and ate lunch at his desk. He did not think about where Taraji was or what she was doing. He had the house, the car, the children. In his mind, she had nothing. He would be wrong about that. Not yet, but soon. Pastor Loretta Means had been watching Taraji for 6 weeks. She was 67 and had run New Canaan Baptist on Scott Street for 22 years. And she knew everyone in the congregation, and she knew when somebody new was using her building and why. Renee had made the introduction. The church had a certified kitchen in the basement that it rented to small caterers for $15 an hour, and Taraji booked 4 hours every Monday and Wednesday and cooked enough for 3 markets. For 6 weeks, Pastor Loretta said nothing. She came down once or twice during the cooking hours and stood in the doorway and watched and smelled what was coming off the stove and went back upstairs. On a Thursday evening at the end of the 6th week, she came down after Taraji had finished cleaning, and she sat at the prep table and she asked Taraji to sit. "I've been smelling your food for 6 weeks," she said. "I've watched you carry those pots in here at 4 in the morning. I've watched you clean this kitchen better than anybody who has ever rented it." She paused. "What are you doing? And who are you doing it for?" Taraji told her. Short sentences, no drama, no self-pity. The divorce, the $300, the recipe book and the markets and the bus routes and the rolling cart. Pastor Loretta listened to all of it, and then she told Taraji something. Her husband, Otis Means, had died 11 years ago, 61 years old, a heart attack on a Sunday morning before service. Otis had been a deacon and a pitmaster, and he had owned a food truck, green and white, and he parked it behind the church every Sunday after service and sold barbecue plates for $5, ribs and slaw and cornbread, and the line went around the building. When Otis died, Loretta could not bring herself to sell the truck. She parked it behind the fellowship hall and covered it with a tarp, and for 11 years it sat there, the engine cold for 7 of them, the paint peeling 2 tires flat. "Come with me," she said. She walked Taraji around back and pulled the tarp off. Green paint, faded and chipping. Flat tires on the passenger side. A dent in the rear bumper. Taraji opened the side door and stepped inside. 2 gas burners. 1 prep counter. A small dead refrigerator. A serving window with a metal shutter stuck halfway open. She put her hands on the counter and looked at the burners and the window and the space where plates would be handed out. And for the first time since the sofa on Alabama Street, she could see what the next thing looked like. "I am not giving this to you," Pastor Loretta said. "Otis built it, and I will not give it away, but I will rent it to you for $100 a month. You fix it yourself. If it runs and your business holds for 6 months, I will sell it to you at what Otis paid for it in 2008, $4,500. "I don't have money to fix it," Taraji said. "You have a church full of people who know how to fix things," Loretta said. "Ask. Calvin Doss, 44, a mechanic and a member of New Canaan for 19 years, looked at the engine on a Saturday and said the fuel pump was gone and the battery was dead and the alternator was corroded. Parts may be $350. And he would do the labor for free. Because Pastor Loretta asked, and because a woman willing to pull a cart onto a bus at 5 in the morning deserved a truck that started. Yolanda Pierce, who worked at a body shop out in Pasadena, offered to sand and repaint it in exchange for 2 months of free meals. The parts came to $347, paid out of 5 weeks of market earnings. Calvin worked 3 Saturdays in a row. Yolanda came after her shifts. In 3 weeks, the engine turned over, the tires were new, the gas line reconnected, the paint deep brown with gold lettering down the side. Taraji painted the name herself with a cardboard stencil and $6 of gold paint from the hardware store. Cora's Table, her grandmother's name on a truck that ran in a gravel lot behind a church in the 3rd Ward. She stood in front of it after the last coat dried and did not say anything. She reached into her bag and took out the photograph. Cora May Booker, 1989, white apron, smiling like she knew something nobody else knew yet. Taraji taped it to the wall inside the truck, next to the serving window. Then she went in and turned the burners on. The first month she parked on Navigation Boulevard in the East End Industrial Corridor. Lunch from 11:30 to 1:30, plates at $7. Smothered chicken over rice. Red beans, fried catfish on Fridays. Week 1 she sold 32 plates, $96 after ingredients, minus $12 in gas, minus the rental split across the month, $41 on the days she worked, not enough for rent. Enough to keep the stove lit. Week 2, 37 plates. Week 3, 41, and a foreman named Earl Briggs started bringing his whole crew, and the crew told the crew on the next site over. By the end of the month, she was selling 40 plates a day, $280 in revenue, against a cost of $350 a plate when she bought in bulk from the restaurant supply on the South Loop. Every night, she sat at the small table in Renee's apartment and wrote in a notebook. Revenue on the left, costs on the right, notes at the bottom. Catfish sells out first on Fridays. Red beans move slow on Wednesdays. corn muffins next week. In month 2, she added a second stop, downtown on Main Street, 5 to 8 in the evening, the after-work crowd and the nurses coming off shift, and that doubled her customers. In month 3, the phone started ringing, people asking where she would be parked. She had no website. She had a phone number painted on the side of the truck and 40 plates that sold out every day. Renee set up a Facebook page one Sunday. Cora's Table. One photo of the truck, the menu, the daily location posted every morning at 5. 2 weeks later, the page had 400 followers. 4 weeks later, 1,200. People shared it. People tagged friends. They posted pictures of their plates and wrote things underneath. Best soul food in Houston. This reminds me of home. $200 a day, 6 days a week, $1,200 a week before taxes. And she kept that notebook the way her grandmother had kept the recipe book. Carefully, in ink. Without shortcuts, she called Jalen and Amani every evening at 7:30. The arrangement allowed 2 afternoon visits a week and every other weekend, and she brought food to every visit, packed in foil, carried on the bus to the house on Inwood Drive, where she was no longer allowed inside. She handed the bag to Jalen at the door and sat on the porch steps with both children and watched them eat. Amani said the same thing every time. "This is the best food in the world, Mom." One evening, Jalen said something else, quietly, between bites. "Dad asked why you're selling food on the street." Taraji looked at him. "What did you tell him?" "I told him it was good," Jalen said. Marcus knew. He had been asking the children questions. Where does she park? How many customers? Is anybody helping her? The questions sounded casual. They were not casual. He was keeping track, and she did not know it yet. 4 months after the divorce, she filed a motion for joint custody. Her lawyer was Adrian Foster, 31, third year at Gulf Coast Legal Aid, family law, 47 custody cases, and not one loss where the mother could show stable income and housing. She had also never gone up against Preston Vance. Vance filed the response in 9 days. It ran 41 pages. The custody review was held at the Harris County Family Court on a Tuesday in August, Judge Doyle presiding. Vance went first. He presented screenshots of the Cora's Table page. He presented photographs of the truck on Navigation Boulevard. He presented Taraji's self-reported income and noted that it fluctuated week to week. He presented the fact that she had lived on a friend's sofa for the first 2 months and had only recently secured housing. He framed every piece of it the same way. Instability. A woman who could not hold steady income. A woman running what he called an informal street operation. "This is not a stable environment for children," Vance said. He did not mention the food handler's permit, or the commercial kitchen certification, or the truck lease, or the tax filings Adrian had prepared, because mentioning them would make Taraji look like exactly what she was, a business owner. Adrian went second. She was younger than Vance by 22 years, and she did not have his suits or his reputation in that room. She had a folder. 3 months of self-employment tax filings, revenue climbing every month. A signed lease for a studio on Holman Street, $850 a month, Taraji's name on it. The permit, the kitchen agreement, the truck lease. 14 handwritten letters from regular customers, everyone saying the same thing in different words. This woman works hard. This woman feeds people. This woman shows up. And one letter from Pastor Loretta Means, 22 years running a church in the 3rd Ward, stating that Taraji had rented the kitchen 4 months without missing a payment, that she was a responsible tenant and a person of character, that the community trusted her with their food and their children. Judge Doyle read through all of it. She looked at Vance and at Adrian and at Taraji. She did not rule. She continued the case 60 days. She wanted to see sustained income and confirmed housing before she made a determination, and both parents would keep the current arrangement during the continuance. She closed the folder and called the next case. Taraji walked out and stood in the parking lot. 60 days. She needed to hold $200 a day for 60 days without a single gap. She looked at her phone. One message from Imani. "Are you coming to get us, Mom?" For 20 days, she worked from 4 in the morning to 9 at night. She added 2 dishes from the book, Cora's fried okra and Cora's peach cobbler, and both sold out the first day, and revenue climbed to $240. On day 25, she signed a lease renewal and mailed a copy to Adrian. On day 30, she filed her 4th month of taxes, gross up 11%. On day 38, a woman walked up to the window on Main Street at 6:15 in the evening. 34, short hair, a press badge clipped to her jacket. She ordered the smothered chicken and ate it standing on the sidewalk, and then she came back to the window. "How long have you been doing this?" she said. Taraji told her. Short sentences. No drama. The woman said her name was Tamara Hughes, and she worked at KTXN, and she was producing a series on small business owners in black communities across Houston. "I feature you?" she said. "I need to think about it," Taraji said. "Take your time," Tamara said. That night, Taraji called Renee from the studio floor, the book open on the counter across the room. "A reporter wants to do a piece on me." Renee was quiet a moment. "What would Cora say?" she said. Taraji looked at the book across the room. She did not answer right away. She called Tamara the next morning. "Now you need to understand something about how this fell apart for Marcus. Because it did not fall apart by accident. It fell apart through a woman named Danielle Albright, his younger sister, 33 years old, who lived in a townhouse out in Sugar Land that she had bought 3 years earlier with Marcus as the co-signer on the mortgage. When the divorce happened, Danielle reached out to Taraji. She said she did not agree with what her brother had done. She said family was family, papers or no papers. She came to the truck and wiped down the counter after lunch and brought napkins from the wholesale club because she had a membership and Taraji did not. She asked how the hearing went. She asked about the children, and Taraji answered every question, honestly, because Danielle was family, because Danielle had shown up when nobody else from Marcus's side had. The week Tamara Hughes came to the truck, Danielle called on a Wednesday evening, and the conversation was normal, business, the kids, and then she asked a question she had not asked before. "Somebody told me a reporter came by." "What's that about?" Taraji told her. "A local piece, small business owners, nothing about the divorce, just the food." Danielle said that sounded wonderful, and that she was proud of her. Then she hung up, and 14 minutes later, she sent Marcus a text with the reporter's name, the station, and the timeline for filming. It was not the first text. Danielle had been feeding her brother updates since the beginning. When Taraji bought the truck, when she hired the mechanic, when she filed for custody. Danielle was not cruel. She was in debt. The townhouse carried a mortgage of $187,000, and Marcus was the co-signer, and 6 months before the divorce he had reminded her of that fact in a phone call that lasted under 4 minutes. He did not threaten. He did not raise his voice. He told her he expected her to keep him informed about Taraji's situation, and that if she chose not to, he would remove himself from the loan, and without his name, her credit would not carry the mortgage, and she would lose the house. She had run the numbers that same night. So, she called Taraji every week and asked careful questions and reported back. She chose her own house over her conscience. Whether that was the right math was a question only Danielle could answer, and she had not answered it yet. Marcus called Taraji on a Tuesday evening while she was closing up the truck on Main Street. He used her name softly, the way he used to when he wanted something to sound like it was her idea. He said the divorce was a private matter. He said going on television would hurt the children, that Jalen was asking questions at school, that Imani had been quiet. He said she needed to think about what was best for them. She let him finish. "I'm not telling our story, Marcus," she said. "I'm building mine." She hung up and set the phone on the counter and stood there a few seconds, and then she started cleaning up for the night. Marcus called Preston Vance within the hour. Vance drafted a cease and desist addressed to Tamara Hughes at KTXN, stating that any segment referencing Marcus Albright or the details of his divorce would be considered defamatory and would result in legal action. He sent it certified and by email the same day. This was Marcus's mistake, the one that would cost him everything he was trying to protect. Tamara received it on a Thursday morning and took it to her executive producer, who read it and sat back in his chair. The original segment was supposed to be 2 minutes, a feel-good local piece, the kind people watch and forget by dinner. The cease and desist changed that. A man sending a legal threat to a television station to stop a story about his ex-wife selling plates from a truck. The producer saw something bigger, not a food story, a power story, a woman who lost everything, rebuilding in public, while the man who took it tried to shut her down from behind a lawyer's desk. The segment went from 2 minutes to 8, from the 6 o'clock local to prime time, from a single visit to a 3-day shoot. Marcus had turned a food truck story into a story about control, the exact thing he did not want anyone to see. At the same time, Vance filed a supplemental brief arguing that Taraji was seeking media attention rather than focusing on her children, attaching screenshots of the page and Tamara's inquiry email. It landed on Judge Doyle's desk 11 days before the 60-day hearing. The segment had not yet aired. Nobody knew what it would contain. Not the court, not Marcus, not Taraji. Tamara and a 2-person crew arrived at the church kitchen at 4:15 in the morning. The stove was already on, the book open on the counter to the smothered chicken. Tamara did not direct anything. She told the camera to shoot what it saw. Taraji cooked the way she cooked every morning, measuring and stirring and tasting and adjusting the way Cora had taught her 30 years before on Effie Road. She did not look at the camera. She did not perform. They followed her to the truck, filmed the drive to Navigation Boulevard, filmed the window opening and the line stretching past the corner by noon. Tamara interviewed her on the prep stool between shifts. I started with $300 and a folding table and a recipe book my grandmother gave me when I left Memphis, Taraji said. She did not say Marcus's name. She did not describe the divorce. I lost everything I thought I had, she said. Then I found everything I actually needed. The camera moved to the book, brown leather, blue ink, notes in the margins, do not rush the roux. The photograph of Cora taped to the wall, white apron, flour on her hands. Tamara interviewed 3 customers, and the woman from the very first Saturday, the one in the church hat, looked into the camera and said what she had said 8 months before. This food reminds me of home. I don't know how she does it. The set aired on a Thursday in prime time, 8 minutes. The title card read, Cora's Table, 1 woman, $300, and a recipe book. Within 48 hours, the page went from 1,200 followers to 23,000. The line at the truck doubled. 3 other stations asked to use the footage. The clip crossed 200,000 views in the first week. People who ever heard of Cora's Table shared it with one sentence. You need to watch this. People who had eaten there shared it with another. I knew this food was special. Now you know why. And you already know who was watching. Marcus was sitting in the living room of the River Oaks house when the segment started, not watching it, reading something on his phone. Then he heard the name, Cora's Table. He looked up. He saw the truck, brown paint, gold lettering, a line of people in front of the window. He saw Taraji inside at the stove, wearing the same apron she had worn in his kitchen for 12 years, tilting her head the same way she always did when she tasted something. The same way every single day for 12 years in a kitchen he had walked through without ever once stopping. He saw the recipe book, the brown leather cover, and he recognized it because it had sat on the shelf above the microwave in his kitchen for the entire length of the marriage, and he had never opened it. He saw the photograph of Cora on the wall, and he did not recognize the woman in it. He had lived in the same house as that photograph for 12 years and had never asked who she was. He heard a customer say, this food reminds me of home. He heard Taraji say, I found everything I actually needed. He saw the number on the screen, $300. That was what Vance had told him was left in the old account. Not worth pursuing, Vance had said. $300 is not material. And Marcus had agreed, because $300 was nothing. $300 was a food truck with 23,000 followers, and a line around the block, and a segment 200,000 people had already watched. He picked up the remote and turned the television off and sat in the house he had taken from his wife and looked at the dark screen. He had taken the house, the car, custody of both children. He had spent 14 months making sure her name appeared on nothing. He had left her with $300 and a recipe book because those were the 2 things his lawyer said were not worth the paperwork. The recipe book was on television. The $300 had built something 23,000 people followed. The woman he had erased from every document was standing in front of a camera telling the telling the city of Houston she had found everything she needed. And the thing she found had been in his house for 12 years, on his shelf, in his kitchen. Right in front of him. He did not see it then. He saw it now, and it was too late. He picked up the phone and called Vance. "Can we use this against her in court?" he said. The 60-day hearing was a Wednesday morning in October, the same courtroom, the same 2 tables. Vance went first, and he had built a new argument on top of the old one. He presented the segment as Exhibit A. He presented the page 23,000 followers. He presented the cease and desist his own office had sent. He framed the whole sequence as proof that Taraji had chosen public attention over her children. The respondent has prioritized media exposure over the stable private environment this court requested, Vance said. He did not mention that the cease and desist was the thing that escalated the segment from 2 minutes to 8. He did not mention that Taraji had not sought the reporter out. He did not mention that his own legal action had turned a small, local story into something 200,000 people watched. Adrian went second. She laid out 5 months of tax records, revenue up every month, the lease renewal, a report from the court-appointed social worker who had visited the studio twice and found it clean and suitable and stable, 23 letters from the community. Then she addressed the segment directly. Tamara Hughes approached Taraji as a customer first and a journalist second, she said. Taraji did not contact the station. She did not mention Mr. Albright or the divorce on camera. The only party who introduced legal conflict into this coverage was Mr. Albright himself. Through the cease and desist, his counsel drafted. The petitioner did not seek attention, Adrian said. She sold plates of food. Attention found her. Judge Doyle looked at the filings. She asked if either party had additional witnesses. Vance said no. Adrian said yes. The courtroom door opened and Danielle Albright walked in, and Marcus turned in his chair and looked at his sister, and his sister did not look at him. She took the stand. Adrian asked her to state her relationship to both parties. She said she was Marcus's sister and that she had been in contact with Taraji since 2 months after the divorce. Adrian asked why she had contacted Taraji. "Help," Danielle said, "because I believed what my brother did was wrong." Adrian asked whether she had communicated information about Taraji to Marcus during that time. Danielle was quiet a moment. Then she said yes. She said Marcus had asked her to monitor Taraji and report back, and that she had done so for about 5 months, and that the information included the truck, the custody filing, the reporter, and the timeline for the segment. Adrian asked why she had agreed to do it. Danielle said Marcus was the co-signer on her mortgage, and that he had told her if she did not cooperate, he would remove himself from the loan, and that she could not carry the mortgage alone. Adrian asked what had changed. Danielle said Marcus removed himself from the loan anyway 6 weeks ago because she had not forwarded news of the segment fast enough. She said she had lost the townhouse. The bank had begun foreclosure 11 days after he pulled his name. Adrian presented printed text messages, 47 of them over 5 months, with dates and times. Each one sent within minutes of a conversation Danielle had with Taraji, each one containing something Taraji had shared in confidence. Judge Doyle read them slowly. She looked at Marcus. She looked at Vance. She closed the folder. The court finds that the father engaged in a pattern of surveillance and interference through a third party that is inconsistent with the best interests of the children, she said. Primary custody is transferred to the mother, effective immediately. The father retains visitation on a schedule to be set by this court within 14 days. She called the next case. Taraji walked out of the courtroom and stood on the steps and took out her phone and called Jalen. "You're coming home," she said. Filing became public record the following week, and the surveillance was described in plain legal language that anybody who read it could understand. Marcus Albright had used his sister to spy on his ex-wife during an active custody proceeding. 2 of his partners at Caldwell Sterling read it. Marcus had managed portfolios for clients who trusted him with their money and their private information. Trust was the product. The filing described a man who had used personal leverage to coerce a family member into conducting surveillance, and the partners did not call him in to discuss it. They simply reassigned his accounts. He lost 2 commercial relationships worth a combined $370,000 in fees within the month, not because anybody punished him, but because nobody wanted to work with him anymore. The woman he had been seeing, a marketing executive named Brielle, stopped returning his calls in November. She had been there for what Marcus represented. What he represented was gone. Vance sent the final invoice, $47,000. 14 months of strategy, the filing fees, the hearings, the cease and desist, the hours billed at $425 each. Marcus had paid $47,000 to take everything from a woman who had $300. The woman with $300 got her children back. The man with $47,000 in legal bills moved into a one-bedroom apartment out in Pasadena with a court record that followed his name. He called Taraji once, a Sunday evening in December, and she saw his name on the screen and set the phone face down on the counter and let it ring until it stopped. He called Jalen the next day, and Jalen picked up, and Marcus said, "I miss you, son." Jalen was quiet for a few seconds. "Mom's cooking tonight," he said. "I have to go." He hung up, not angry, not cold, just somewhere else now, living a life that had moved on without the man who thought he controlled where it went. Marcus sat in the apartment, one bedroom, a kitchen he did not use. He had taken the house and lost it to payments he could no longer cover. He had taken the car, and it sat in a lot he could not afford to maintain. He had taken the children, and the children had chosen to leave. He had spent 14 months making sure Taraji had nothing, and he had left her with $300 and a recipe book, and the $300 had built a truck, and the recipe book had built a name, and the name had built a line around the block. First evening Jalen and Imani stayed at the studio on Holman Street was a Thursday in late October. Taraji moved a second mattress into the bedroom that morning and put fresh sheets on it and set the small table by the window with 3 plates, 3 glasses, 3 forks. She opened the book to the first page. Red beans and rice, the first recipe Cora ever wrote down, the one with the note in the margin that said, "This one is for when somebody comes home." She cooked it the way Cora taught her, slowly without rushing, and she let the fire do its work. On the wall above the stove she had hung the photograph, framed now, plain wood, clean glass. Cora May Booker, 1989, white apron, flour on her hands, smiling like she knew something nobody else knew yet. Imani came into the kitchen first and looked up at the photograph. "Who's that?" she said. "That's the woman who taught me everything I know," Taraji said. They sat down, 3 people at a small table in a studio apartment in the 3rd ward, and Taraji put the food on their plates. Jalen ate without talking. Imani took a bite and looked up at her mother. "This is the best food in the world, Mom." The same words, the same voice, a different place. Not the porch steps of a house she was no longer allowed inside. Not a visit with a time limit. Home. Taraji looked at her children, and at the photograph on the wall, and at the book open on the counter, and the apartment smelled like smoked paprika and brown butter, and something sweet underneath. You feed people and you look them in the eye. That is how you tell somebody they matter. She did not say it out loud. She watched her children eat. Marcus took the house and the car and the children and 12 years of his wife's work and made it disappear from every document he could find, and he thought he had left her with nothing. He had left her with everything, because the one thing he never understood about Taraji, the one thing he could not take because he could not see it, was where she came from. A kitchen on Effie Road, a grandmother who fed anyone who was hungry and never asked for a dime. A recipe book with 214 pages of careful handwriting and notes in the margins that said things like, "Do not rush and let the fire do its work, and this one is for when somebody comes home." He had every advantage. He had a top-tier attorney and 14 months and every asset restructured into his name, and he still missed the only thing that mattered. You cannot take what you cannot name on a document, and you cannot buy back what you never learned to value. Some people spend their whole lives building things they can put their name on. Taraji inherited something that could not be filed or transferred or locked in a trust. A recipe, a wooden spoon, a photograph of a woman in a white apron who poured her whole life into a book and trusted that the right person would carry it forward. The people who only see what a thing is worth on paper will always miss what actually matters, and by the time they realize it, it is already too late. And Marcus did realize it. That is the part that stayed with him in the one bedroom in Pasadena, longer than the lost house or the lost contracts or the woman who stopped calling. He realized that for 12 years the most valuable thing in his life had been sitting on a shelf above his own microwave, and he had walked past it every single day, and he had handed it to her in a divorce because his lawyer said it wasn't worth the paperwork. He had been a man who measured everything, and he had measured the one thing that counted at 0. He sat with that. He had built exactly what he deserved. And across the city, in a small studio with a framed photograph on the wall, a woman who had started with $300 set 3 plates on a table and watched her children eat and let the fire do its work.